It's time now for the Todd Leonard Show. Leave those negative stories behind as we focus on the positive and hear from those who give back and help others. Let's start your day with some inspirational stories. Now, here's your host, Todd Leonard.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Todd Leonard Show, Journey of Giving Back. Each week we feature incredible people making the world better, to inspire, to motivate, and to realize every chance you can, pay it forward and give back. I have a tremendous honor today. We're going to be featuring a tremendous person, a person that rose from a lot of adversity and went through a very tough childhood, but he rose to the pinnacle in the legal profession. Every moment realizing you got to give back. And it's a really great honor today to meet and have you join us today to have Skippy Weinstein on our show. Good morning, Skippy.
Good morning, Todd, and thank you for the privilege of being on your show.
Well, thank you. And I want to also thank your lovely wife, Nancy. I had the great privilege of meeting her earlier today, and I can see the love and just the joy that she brings just to the house, and thank you again. I wanted, first of all, I've been thinking about this for quite a while. I know I've been trying to get you on the show for a few years, and it's just like I said, just a real honor today. So the first thing I got to ask is your nickname, Skippy, because I think of Skippy, I think of peanut butter. I actually love peanut butter. But how did you get the nickname Skippy?
Many years ago, I was about 6, 7, and my grandmother would call me, and she would call Stephen, and I would never come. And one day there was a dog that I loved, a mutt, and the dog's name was Skippy. And my grandmother then, she said, you know, I'm going to call the dog because Skippy loves animals and he follows her, the dog. So she calls the dog Skippy. Dog turns around, I followed the dog, and that's how I got the name Skippy.
So one of the things about nicknames is sometimes you outgrow it, but I mean, you know, you're 86 years young and everybody calls you Skippy. Yeah. You have that name, the moniker Skippy, yeah. and you never like tossed it aside.
No, it's interesting. Many times when I would appear before the Supreme Court, I would be walking in or seeing some of the justices, and everybody would say, hey, Skippy, how you doing? I said, I'll let you know, kiddingly. But always Skippy.
So one of the things I mentioned, your lovely wife, Nancy, you've been married almost 63 years, coming up real soon, and known her 65. Does she call you Skippy?
Yes, she does.
Interesting.
She can call me anything she wishes.
Amen to that.
Amen to that.
So one of the fascinating things about you is you're a tremendous trial lawyer certified by the Supreme Court of New Jersey in civil and criminal law back in 1982. You've had an illustrious legal career. And one of the really interesting things and why I wanted to have you on the show for all of us is where you started. Where are you from originally?
Well, I was born on 16th Avenue in Newark. We moved to South 11th Street, South Ward of Newark, and I grew up in Newark and had my best friend, Louie, and we would ride bicycles around the neighborhood. And I still go back to Newark now. I go back to the school that I went to in the kindergarten and first, second, third grade. And I go back there to visit the kids. I talk to them. I bring African-American judges or senators to expose them to the hope and dream of success for the future. And I remember once I was leaving and one of the young boys turned to me and said, would you sign my page? And I said, no. I said, I think it's more important that you sign mine because someday you're going to be where I am, and I want you to surpass me.
Skippy, that, if I may dream, that hope to instill in the younger generation, why is that so important to you?
I think the difficulty today is that there is such a dichotomy in being brought up. I think today's world is so challenging, so hostile, so unkind, that somebody has to look at the children because those are the leaders for tomorrow. In fact, Many years ago, I was on the University of Medicine and Dental School in New Jersey. And I heard that the FBI and all the federal agencies were having something at the airport of Morristown. They'd have the Secret Service, they'd have the Coast Guard, they'd have the Navy. And I decided, I was on the board of UMDNJ for a long time. I was vice chairman, so I had the ability to call people and get things done. And maybe that was kind of selfish on my part, but I felt I wanted my kids from Madison Avenue School. And lo and behold, I worked it out. I had the Sheriff's Department in Essex, the Sheriff's Department in Morris, and I got buses for my kids. And from Madison Avenue, 132 of them got in the buses. Lunches were served. Shirts were obtained, which I got them. I still wear mine I got for me. And brought them up to the airport. And they had the best time. They wrote me letters, which I still have, thanking me for the exposure that not all police are bad. And maybe I would want to be an FBI agent. And I said to Nancy, it was successful because the hatred for cops and whatever else was the hatred, they understood that these people were doing a good thing for a good purpose and for good people.
Yeah, you know, Skippy, we do live in a society, unfortunately, very polarized. And everybody's at each other's throats with the political environment, and unfortunately, there's a lot of hatred in the world. And one of the reasons why I love doing the show is I want people to focus on the goodness and the kindness of people, and to set an example, and hopefully inspire and motivate. So you started out, as I understand it, I had to research to be prepared. I know you're a tremendous trial lawyer, and you know I was blessed to work with my late dad, and my dad always said, you got to be ready. So I have to be ready.
That's right.
So one of the things is you were in the South Ward, and I understand, unfortunately, you had gone in the wrong direction in life. If you may, and if you can share a little bit, what happened in your younger years as a teenager?
I'll only go so far in telling you that there had been a major problem with me. And, you know, people nowadays blame their mother, they blame their father. I'm not so sure that's accurate, but in any event, I found the wrong way to go. And I ultimately was brought before the juvenile judge in Essex County. And it was February of 1954. And he said to me, look, I'm going to let you go. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to monitor you. And if you get into trouble again, you're going to come back in front of me and you're going to go to a reform school. And I figured, yeah, you know, that's a lot of crap. And lo and behold, like an idiot, I left, got into trouble, and went back to him in May. And he looked at me and he said, I told you, you're back and you're going away. And sure enough, on June 25th, 1954, I was sent and received admission to a place like a reform school.
No, you were 15 at the time.
Yeah, I was 15.
You're young.
I was very young. And it was very hard because there were people that were there and wanted me to understand who were the upper echelon at that cottage where we stayed. There were a bunch of cottages. In one cottage, the kids that one example gave, he poured alcohol gas on a sleeping person who couldn't afford to live in a house, and he lit it, and he burnt him to death while laughing at the fire, which is outrageous. But I realized that I was there, and they tried to get me into school. They had a school there. And it became apparent that I was incapable of learning. And they figured, okay, if he can't learn, let's put him on the farm. So I worked on the farm with a wonderful farmer by the name of Joe McAvoy. And Joe, God bless him, he would come back from the bar at 4:30 in the morning and bring me the biggest ham and cheese sandwich ever. He would fall asleep on the hay, and I would have my sandwich. I would then line up the cows, milk the cows, and then I would let them out, At 7 o'clock, I would go to have breakfast with my cottage, and they would go to school, and I'd go back to the farm. And he only yelled at me once, and I was very hurt, and it was my stupidity. One of the cows was pregnant because we had a bull, and you can't trust bulls. And this bull got to this cow, and of course she's pregnant, so she's giving birth. I was so excited because I love animals. And she gives birth. And I am so excited. I take the little baby and I lift it up and I put a dog collar on and I take it for walking. And Joe, the farmer, sees me and he's screaming at me words I can't tell you over this, screaming how stupid I was, that cow or calf is going to die. Why is it going to die? Because you took it away from the mother. And the mother has to be the first to touch that baby. And I felt horrible. We then tried to get the mother, and the mother kept turning away. Finally, we did it. Not me, Joe did it. And that was one of the stupidest things I've ever done.
So, you talked about this gentleman, Joe McAvoy, who, despite being in reform school and living on a farm, was kind. And he was kind, as much as you had the old brushing, obviously, but the kindness that he showed. But one of the things that's striking is they didn't think that you could be educated. And I have to say, Skippy, you have one of the most incredible memories and your ability to be so articulate. And by the way, I love your shirt. I mean, I saw the dog. You love dogs. I know you
dogs.
and Nancy have 2 golden retrievers.
Yes.
I have a German Shepherd, a lot of work, but, dogs are loving, but it's a lot of work. But the kindness, but you were in reform school and the work ethic that you were being taught there. What was your normal day like for the 2 years you were on the farm?
First of all, it was 2 years, thank God. And I was not capable of going to school.
But why?
Because
why
I couldn't learn anything. I couldn't read and write properly. I was very bad at reading. I never read. I was bad at writing. And I was advised by my family that I was a loser. And I would never, I'm not going to get into this any deeper than I'll never make it. I'll work loading trucks and unloading trucks. And that's where I was going to be. So I worked on the farm. I got to know animals very well. I was a great milker. And I would then go back, have lunch with the cottage and go back to the farm, and back and forth, never going to school when they would go to school. And that's how I lived 2 years.
Unbelievable. So I have to say, I don't think I've ever milked a cow. I know I'm pretty confident I haven't, because something you kind of remember. But the hours that you had to get up, kind of like the Ben Franklin, early to bed, early to rise. What were the hours like on the farm?
It was fun because I was 15, 16, 17 years old. So getting up at 4:30 to milk, it didn't mean anything because we were in the cottage after dinner about 7:30. And other than if things were quiet and there were no problems in the cottage, I would probably go to sleep. My roommate was a guy by the name of Happy, and Happy and I were wonderful friends. And I don't know if I should tell a story about Happy, because I loved him.
Well, first of all, we're in your home, and you've been so gracious. You can talk about Happy, about how he impacted your life, and about how friendship is so important in life, because this is one of the fascinating things we were talking a little bit before we started about life's mysteries, is how people come in your life sometimes, which is a blessing. Sometimes they should run from your life, but how people can impact your trajectory. Tell us about Happy. And I love the name Happy, by the way.
Well, Happy came from an orphanage, and he was in trouble. And he came to this place, being sent there. He had sneakers, a pair of boots. He had 2 pairs of socks, 2 undershirts, 2 pairs of jeans, 1 jacket, and he was self-limited. And he and I would cover each other when there was an issue. And one time he wasn't there, and I was walking up the L stairs. You walk up there and then you turn left. And right here is a wall. He wasn't there for some reason. And I walked up the stairs and I turned left, and one of the guys came out from behind the wall with a garbage can and lifted up and beat me over the head with the garbage can. I still have all these stitches in my head today. And when I wash my hair, I always feel them. And he and I started to fight. We fell down the stairs. We were fighting. Our cottage mother came out, and she was a powerful woman, lovely, lovable, and caring. And she split us up. I went to the hospital to get my head sewed up. And the other guy, he was the enforcer for the guy that was in charge of the cottage. And for some reason, they didn't like me. And I could understand why. So that was that experience.
But you know, happy you mentioned about what a bond that you shared, because you had each other's backs.
Yeah.
And I know you were telling me before we started about how you ran into him years later. And what a moment that was because of the bond. And you know, I tell my young boys, you know, you can meet people in your life and years later they become so important and you don't realize at the time, but as time goes on, you're like, I missed that person. There was tremendous value in the friendship.
Well, I'm going to tell you the story. I hope that I survive without crying. And if I had to go back to a courtroom and try a case, I would never tell you this story for the public. But I'm going to tell it to you now.
Okay.
My wife and I went with another couple. He was the lawyer for Columbia. And we went to the Friars restaurant across from the American Ballet Theater. And we gave the people our coats, and we got a thing. We ate dinner. And I was going out to get the coats for my Nancy and myself. And I handed the ticket to somebody. And it was dark behind the half door, Dutch door. And all of a sudden I hear, Skippy? Skippy? I said, yes. He said, Skippy, happy.
Take your time. I know this is an important story in your life.
He opens the door, and he comes out, and we hug each other, and we're standing there crying, uncontrollable crying. And everybody is looking around at what is going on. And I couldn't stop crying. And between the tears, he says to me, I read about you in the New York paper all the time. I read about you in this thing and that thing. And I said something to him about we still love each other and we're still crying. And he said, oh no, the manager came out and said, hey, Happy, get back here and do your coats. And he couldn't lose that job. And I said, we'll get together. But I stupidly didn't get where he was living. That was so stupid of me. I am angry at myself throughout. In fact, over the past 5, 10, 15 years, I have looked for him. I have called where the place was. I've done everything to find him, just to make sure whatever he needs, I would make sure that he would have it. And my wife has been extremely encouraging for me to try to find him. I'm 86, he's 86. So the chances of living the rough life that he had, he may not be alive.
So Skippy, and thank you for sharing with us. I know how much Happy means to you. And that's part of life's mysteries, right? It's like people, like I was talking about, come in your life and they just touch your heart in a way, and there's a bond that will last forever. no matter where you are, either physically here or somewhere you have an angel watching over you. But that's part of life, unfortunately. And thank you again for sharing that. I know it's very emotional for you. And that's one of the beautiful things. You know, you've been such an accomplished person as a lawyer, but you never lost your humanity. I want to go, if I may, a little bit back. You made it to reform school, and as I shared, I mean, you have a memory like you were just like, you know, talking like yesterday at the Friars restaurant. You had to get high school. You had to get you go to high school?
No. I'm happy to tell you that story, and I was a complete failure.
Well, why do you say you were a complete failure? Why is that?
Well, because I left the reform school. I was 17. I had no background other than milking cows, and I had no skill to do anything other than I was very strong. So what I did was my best friend got me a job loading trucks. So I would load trucks from 9 in the morning till 6 at night. And sometimes at 6 at night, I'd leave at 5 of 6, and I'd go to pump gas at a gas station until 11. The question that I've asked myself, and my brother and I do not agree, I do not know where I lived after I left the reform school. My brother said one place, and I'm not sure. I don't remember that. So it was moving for me to get a job. My best friend, Louis, got that job for me. And then I left there and I started to install air conditioning. And I had a partner who was about a 6'3", 300 pounds of muscle, African American, who I just adored. I tried to find him too, by the way. And we're carrying up this big air conditioner in East Orange, and the steps are going like this. And we make the turn. I'm on the bottom, he's on the top to hold it up, and I'm just this way. And all of a sudden, it kind of slips, and it hits me here. And I can't move because it's like 300-400 pounds. And lo and behold, we get it loose, and he turns to me and he says, "Skippy, I got to tell you something." So I look at him and I said, "Okay." He said, "You know, I'll be doing this for the rest of my life." He says, "But you shouldn't." He said, "You really should go back, get a degree, get a GED. I don't even think I knew what that was, but get a GED. So, okay. So I just continued. And lo and behold, I thought about that. So I finally set up to take the GED. It doesn't require a hell of a lot of brains to pass a GED. But I failed. And I failed because I had no background, no educational background, no writing and no reading and doing it properly. So I went to a place, they called it Jersey Prep. It was on Raymond Boulevard and Broad Street on the 3rd floor. And they prepped us for taking the GED. So I took it once, I told you I failed. The second time I passed. I was very excited. And then being a big shot to myself, I said, I want to go to college. And I then applied and was turned down to everything. And I then realized that Fairleigh Dickinson was a youth college. In other words, brand new. So I applied there and got in. And they accepted me, and I went to Fairleigh, and the most amazing thing happened to me on the second year. I was needed to sign a plaque that all freshmen have to sign. And this gorgeous-looking, beautiful lady from Long Island asked me to sign her plaque. And I couldn't take my eyes off her. And my buddy, Tommy Mangelli, who unfortunately died of cancer, I couldn't take my eyes off her. And she talked very quietly, very shy, and she was beautiful. I could tell what she was wearing. I knew exactly today what she was wearing then. And she walks away, and he turns to me and says two things. One of them, I'm not even going to tell you what he said. And the second thing, I said to him, I'm going to marry her. And as time went by, she was with somebody else, very lovely, lovely guy. And lo and behold, on April 27th, 1960, we went out for Coke and a pizza. And we've been together 65 years since that. And she had the strength because she knew what my background was. And so did her mother and father and brother. And they were very good to me. They welcomed me with open arms because she welcomed me and she loved me. And the only fight my brother-in-law and I ever had, and he's now 90, built back then lifeguard on Jones Beach, Long Island. Powerful, powerful guy. And I'm sleeping in his room in another bed. And he gets up and I say to him, hey, I'm sleeping. And he tells me where I can do and how I can do it. And I said, don't tell me that. You told me I could sleep here. So he says something about starting with a not nice word. So I get up, he pushes me, I fall off and punch him. He punches me, and his father comes, who's 5'6", 130 pounds. And he's standing at the door, and he says, boys, stop, stop. And both of us looked at each other, returned to him, and we stopped. And I called my father-in-law Coach because he had reasons for being called that for what he did. He had a wonderful heart. And we ended it, and he and I have been the best friends ever since. And we've been friends for over 65 years.
Wonderful. And, you mentioned the love of your life, Nancy, who accepted your background. Because a lot of folks go through stuff in their youth, and they're embarrassed about it, and they always feel like, I'm not going to be anything. But you believed in yourself enough, because I know you mentioned to us that you didn't really feel you had the intellect to learn, but you got into college. And getting ready for the show, as I mentioned, I read that you became very successful at FDU. And you rose to what level within the school?
I did. I was president of my class, and I was president of the student council. And what's interesting is a month ago, I had retired from the Board of Trustees of FDU. I've been on the Board of Trustees for 27 years. And a month ago, I retired after all those years. But I must tell you a funny story that when I ran for president of the student council, the one fraternity was challenging us, and we were down. We were going to lose. But the nurses hadn't come in yet. And the nurses were wearing these white outfits. And where we were having the voting was a building, and out the windows of the building was this little hill, and over the hill was where you come in from the bus or the street. So we're sitting there, and it gets close to 4 o'clock. And my fraternity brothers are saying, Skippy, I'm not sure we're doing so well. All of a sudden, I see the nurses being led by my wife, who was a student nurse, coming over the hill. There were, looks like thousands of them. They were coming over. They came up. Every single one of them voted for me. We took it away. I became student council president.
What was that feeling like when you saw your in life later, your wife with the cavalry of the nurses? And I love nurses, they're angels. But what was that feel? I know it hits you right here.
Oh, it does.
But why did you find that moment in time?
Because she was going like this when going over the hill, and all the nurses were behind her, and they were going to vote for me, and I knew they were. But I have to tell you one story about Congressman James Roosevelt. When I was student council president, I was authorized to assign jobs. Like my roommate was a professional fighter, and I still see him to this day.
That's a good roommate to have, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. He was tough. And we lived together, and I assigned him a job that he gets some money, and I assigned myself a job. But my job was to pick up the people who were doing the lectures at FDU. So I decided I'm going to do that. So every Friday I would pick up someone at Newark Airport, bring them to the school. They would lecture 7, 8 o'clock. I'd take them back so they catch the 11 o'clock. And lo and behold, the person was James Roosevelt. He was the congressman from Newport Beach, California. He was the son of President Franklin Delano. And I would see him every Friday. And Nancy would see his wife, Irene. And Nancy and his wife would sit in the back of the car, and they would laugh at the Hollywood journals that they would read and read to each other in the back of the car. And one day I'm riding with him, and he says to me, "What's the matter with you today?" So I went kind of like, nothing. And he said, "No, that's not you." He said, "What's the matter?" So I said, "Well, I applied to 13 law schools, and today was the last rejection on all 13. So he sits there, "Oh, you must feel badly." "Yeah." I said, "I really wanted to be a courtroom lawyer. Fighting, that's what I want." So we're driving, and he turns to me and he says, "Can you be in D.C. on Tuesday morning?" "No, Monday morning." So I said, "Sure, why?" He says, "Call me later on my private line." So I get him to the airport. I go back. I see Nancy. I tell her what just went on. She says, "Of course you're going." I said, "Of course." Drove down, got there, and he made an arrangement for me to meet the dean of admissions, who had just rejected me. So I get there, and the dean is what I refer to as a Johnny Reb. Feet on the desk, short cut, marine cut, shirt tight with muscles. He says to me, "Mr. Weinstein," and I said to myself, here comes Southern Alabama coming at me. Mr. Weinstein says, "We turn you down." He says, "Why should I accept you now?" And I figured, this is the only chance I'm going to have. I didn't know Roosevelt was in the background. I didn't know that at that time. I said, "Dean," I said, "I'm going to be a lawyer." I said, "I'm going to be a good lawyer." I said, "And someday the school and the law school will be happy and proud that I became a lawyer." I said, "So all I'm asking for is a chance." And that was that. So goodbye, Mr. Weinstein. So I went to see Congressman Roosevelt. He said, "Come see me." So I went to see him. He said, "So?" I said, "You know him, cold like a fish." He says, "Call me tomorrow morning." So I drive back. Nancy says to me, "How did it go?" And I said, "I didn't think it went well at all." So I called the congressman back the next day. He said, "Look," he says, "they're willing to let you go take one course at night. And if you pass it, you may be able to be elevated to the daytime, but not a full course." So I said to him, "Congressman, anything." I was married, my wife was pregnant, So lo and behold, that's how it started.
So I have a question about that, Skippy. So you shared with us, folks were telling you you're not going to account to anything in your life, you're going to be a failure. But somewhere along the lines, you developed a self-belief, which I know is so important in everyone's life. When did that all of a sudden happen? And I got a little excited earlier. I was ready to jump out of my shoes, just spending time with you and your lovely wife today. And one of my boys asked, you got to ask Skippy this question. He's going to be 11 coming up. He's got great questions. So does my soon-to-be 9-year-old.
Sure.
I know all the help I can get, being a host. I mean, I want a lot of extra input.
You're doing great.
Well, thank you. You're very gracious, but we don't want to obviously outkick the coverage. We got to take our time. But my son said, "Why don't you ask Skippy, what made you decide that you were going to change it? You're going to go from a path in life with the wrong crowd, doing the wrong thing. What happened that made you decide that I'm going to turn it around?"
I've always had a very difficult time with failure. And I kind of suspect that I put a challenge to myself that I was unwilling to have people tell me that you are now and you always will be a failure. That came at me very clearly. And I felt that I wanted to show them wrong. And I think the message that I would place in front of your audience would be when you're down and you feel that other people are telling you you're down, take a step back, take a deep breath, and say, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's what I have felt I had to do. And whatever came up, I wanted to be able to prove myself better than what everybody thought I was. You know, when I spoke to the dean that time, I said to him, I am never going to get an A. I may get a B. I will always get C's, and I will probably get D's. Well, about a week ago, my wife and I were cleaning out my drawers in my study, and I came across my grades from law school. And I'm telling you, I got D's, I got C's, and I got one B. And I was so happy when I saw that about a week ago.
Isn't that remarkable? And one of the things for the audience, because you've had a remarkable legal career. It spanned like a half a century. You've been involved in over 44 published groundbreaking opinions here in New Jersey. Lawyers come to you and want you to take over their cases, and you have become such a legendary trial lawyer. And what's fascinating for all of us is that the grades are only part of the puzzle. It's also what's inside your heart and soul. And that's one of the fascinating things. So you were at American universities, right?
Washington College of Law. That's right.
And I read in preparation also that the dean of admissions was struck by the fact you were a straight shooter.
Yes.
A straight shooter. And that resonated with me and hopefully all of us, because in life it's good to be honest and straightforward. Don't be deceptive. Call it the way it is. Yeah. And what did that mean as when you kind of look back on that, being a straight shooter?
Well, I think it's important, even in the work that I did as a trial lawyer. When you talk to your other adversary or adversaries, you eliminate the BS and you get right to the heart of where you're going. And it is not difficult for me to be able to talk to my adversary. And I will generally tell my adversary what's the best part of his case and the worst part of his case. But tell him that it doesn't matter because I have the better of them. But I say it in a way that's not offensive. You know, for example, many of us do things for our own ego. Many years ago, the governor offered me the county prosecutor's job in Morris. And I had waited 7 years to bring this child, brain-damaged baby, to trial. And he offered that to me, and I had a trial date in Newark, and I knew that was going. And Nancy turned to me and she said, what are you going to do? And I knew what I was going to do. My ego is enormous, and I would have loved the acceptance of the prosecutor job for the county. And I said no. And I took the case. I waited 7 years, and that was the last civil case I tried. It was a severely brain-damaged baby as a result of the doctor and nurse's fault. I tried it 6 weeks in Essex County, and the verdict was favorable. And I then went home the last day and had pneumonia. The courtroom was terribly cold. And it was the last one I tried civilly. And I felt so good for the ability to bring this child what she needed for as long as she lived. And the sad part about it is, I tried many of these brain damaged baby cases. I studied medicine. I went auditing courses at the medical school. I audited neurology, orthopedics, autopsies, OBGYN. I mean, there's just this sort of courses that I audited because I wanted to be better than the lawyer sitting next to me. And I remember anesthesiology. For 1 year, every Saturday, I would go to Brooklyn Medical School, 10 o'clock in the morning. I would meet the professor who would prep me on anesthesiology for a year. Because I had a major a paralysis case, and it involved anesthesia. And you have to look on the right bottom side of the numbers, because those numbers tell you what you got to look for, whether or not they're accurate or not. And I studied for a year, and I needed that to make myself feel comfortable in the courtroom in that area. So I always felt that I could do it. And the message I would send would be, when you're down and you feel you're out, that's your pity party for that day. Let's get over pity party. And let's start doing things that can make you proud of yourself. You don't have to tell the world how wonderful you are, but tell yourself how wonderful you can be. I have been blessed for the 65 years that I've been married, or close to that, but together with Nancy. She accepted me as crazy as I've been. And when you do trial work, you're a little nuts, because you have to do this and do that. You study, you get up at 4 in the morning, you study on Saturday, Sunday. I had a jury out 5 days. I missed my godson's bar mitzvah in Houston because I couldn't catch the plane. But you have to be aware, she understood that. And it was a wonderful relationship. I'm now retired. We sit and we laugh at each other. We sit and we talk about the silliness that we've been through. And it's absolutely a magnificent relationship for all those years.
So Skippy, one of the things, because as we were discussing earlier today, my late dad was a trial lawyer, and my late parents were wonderful people. My dad was my hero. My dad was, born and raised in Brooklyn, so he had that moxie to fight, and he was a tremendous trial lawyer. And it resonates when you say the kind of sacrifice you have to make to be not only a great trial lawyer, but anything in life. You got to put your heart and soul in it. And for the listeners and folks maybe thinking about being a lawyer, because it's not for everyone, and in the law it's a noble profession, but it's not you're not built, everyone's not built to be a trial lawyer or whatever kind of law you want to get into. Are there certain tips for the listeners that are considering becoming a lawyer?
Yes, I think that's a really good question. The answer is, trial law is basically 5% of the 100% of lawyers. So that if you have 80,000 lawyers, 4,000 are trial lawyers. There are many things that lawyers can do. For example, I have a granddaughter who just graduated from law school. She wants to do estates. So I said to her, she's beautiful, she's articulate, and she's married, and I said, be a trial lawyer. Oh, no, I wouldn't want to do that. So that trial law, you have to understand, you're dedicating your life to your profession. And you have to make sure that you have a partner that is willing to accept that. And in fact, about a year ago, the New Jersey Association honored me. And that was one of the things that I said to them. And I said, you have to have a partner that is willing to understand that this is your profession. The problem is, we had 4 children within 6 years. Nancy was a fantastic mother, and the kids still call her today. The issue is, when I come home at 7 o'clock at night, I'm up at 5 preparing, going to Hudson or going to Middlesex. She has to understand that I'm not paying attention to her, which is wrong, absolutely wrong. But the fact of the matter, she understands that. And by understanding it, we've had a tidbit of happiness success-wise. And therefore, that was something that we negotiated silently. I didn't have to say to her, I'm sorry I missed your brother's grandson's bar mitzvah. I don't have to say that. She understood that. And that's why the understanding of your spouse or your partner, whatever it may be, is wonderful. But you have to get to understand where you will be if you want to be a trial lawyer. You could do estates, you could do contracts, you could do anything else involving the law. You don't have to do trial work. I was a prosecutor for a couple of years. I loved it. I loved prosecuting people who abused children. Loved that. It was easy for me to do that. Every time the defense lawyer wanted a plea agreement, not with me on children. And when a doctor did something to a child, overdosed that child, I wanted the butt of that doctor. And the last part of my years at the prosecutor's office, the state police came to the prosecutor and asked if I could try their organized crime cases. And I was told I'm going to try the state police organized crime cases. Lo and behold, something happened. They picked up a wire, and they were going to kill me, and they were going to kill my undercover agent. So the next thing I knew, I'm leaving to go out that day, and the place is packed with state police. So they came to our house. Somebody was at our house already. They were there, stayed with shotguns day and night. They took me to court. They took my kids. I think they followed the bus or went on the bus for my kids to go to court. And they stayed overnight at my house.
What was that like, though? I mean, you're talking about sacrificing not just your safety, but your entire family's safety.
Yeah.
Well, I know justice is so important to you, but what was that like to go through that experience?
Well, I knew the state police were there. I mean, if they wanted to take me out, it was going to be hard for them. The question that you're asking is, what about taking out my wife and children? So they had state police with them, and they were covered, so there was not an issue. And when I went into the courthouse, they took me in, state police cars. But we became very good friends with the 4 troopers and detectives. We became very good friends. We would get together and, tease each other. But they were hard workers, and they put together a good case. In fact, one of the guys we call Bobby Bocino, God rest his soul, he was my undercover agent. And I have never met a person stronger internally and braver than Bobby Bocino.
Why did you feel that way about him?
Because he was going undercover into areas where if they knew that he was a cop, they'd kill him right on the spot. And he knew that. But he was out there. He grew up in the valley in Orange. And the valley in Orange was all Italian. And Bobby Bo was Italian. So whenever he would have to go to Orange to make arrests on organized crime people, there was a protocol that you had to follow. They all knew Bobby. So that when he would go to somebody's house to arrest them, you never do it in front of the family. You never do it in front of the kids. You walk them out without handcuffs. You walk him out, you open the car door, he gets in, take him away, then you put the handcuffs on. Because that's the protocol of respect for the organized crime families. And that's the way he did it.
Yeah, Skippy, you shared your obviously affection and respect for law enforcement. And I know you've been involved with the 200 Club for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I know that's very important to me as well, because we all owe a huge debt of gratitude to law enforcement. So one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show, because you have a captivating life story. And you just touched a little bit on it, but in 2023, you received a Lifetime Achievement Award in the legal profession by the NJ.com, the New Jersey Law Journal, because of your tremendous work in the legal field, which is so valuable to so many of us that are in this noble profession. But one of the things was about the journey of giving back and how important it is to give back every chance you can. And that's why I love doing my show, because I meet wonderful people like you and your wife and people that really understand that. When did you realize it was important to give back and to make the world better and not just worry about yourself and your family?
This goes back to Nancy and I discovering after the kids are grown and they're basically out on their own, we had to make a decision what we wanted to do. My wife being an outstanding hospice nurse for 35 years before she retired, and we sat down and decided that if we had a couple of extra pennies, we were going to donate them to an organization. So after a number of years, we decided that her commitment to hospice, we wanted to donate to the Atlantic Health System, and we created a floor of, Nancy designed it, Nancy put the colors, Nancy did the ceiling, the windows, the blinds, the curtains. That way she knew the peacefulness of one passing. And we got 11 rooms, and they are used every day, and they are so thankful. Nancy will turn to me after this is over and say, you said it was Nancy's name that was there. It was my name too. But I want her to get the credit. She's the hospice nurse. The second thing we did was,
Well, if I didn't mean to interrupt, but we all know loved ones that go through, unfortunately, in their life's journey, a time when they're going to go to God, and the hospice nurses are just incredible. My late dad and I used to call them angels, because it's a tremendous burden, but they do it so lovingly and so wonderfully, and they do it in a way that brings dignity to someone's end of their life, because people are scared. I know that's so valuable to you and Nancy to be able to have a floor at Morristown Medical, one of the greatest medical facilities, not just in New Jersey, really in the country. It's grown by leaps and bounds. But what's it like when you guys, let's say, go back, or you have a loved one, or you hear from a nurse, or maybe just as important, a family? What is that feeling inside?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because we get calls thanking us for doing that. And I can tell you that many of the lawyers that I have known have passed through that hospice and palliative care floor. In fact, one of the lawyers was said to his wife as he was being wheeled in, he said, I want to really go home and die. And she pointed to the wall that has Nancy's name and mine, and she said, with that, you are home. And he died there. And many of the lawyers that I have known throughout the years have gone there, and their spouses, whether or not male or female, have said that to me. And I'm so happy that Nancy ultimately felt that was important to do.
It's a beautiful and so important, and I'm proud, to know you guys and to know what you're doing for the community in their time of need and lifting up families through a crisis. I know education's important to you, and I know that, we talked a little earlier about people saying you're going to be a failure, you're not going to turn into anything, you can't recall things, you're not going to be a student. And obviously, you turned all the naysayers wrong, obviously. But I know that the Washington School of Law, there's a courtroom, right? You have a courtroom named after you. So this is another fascinating thing about your life. I know you talked about the dean, that President Roosevelt's son was behind the scenes, but you did the hard work. But what's it like to go to a law school and have a courtroom named after yourself?
This is such an interesting question. The law school bought 7 acres in Washington and was going to move everything there. And it was a nunnery where the nuns would be, and the chapel was absolutely breathtaking. So lo and behold, I get a call and they say, can you come? We want to talk to you. So Nancy and I went through college together. Nancy and I went through law school together. And we go down to Washington, and the dean pulls us out for dinner, I think it was. And he says, we understand that we're going to have a courtroom, and it's where where you have the prayers. It's like a cathedral. The room is gorgeous. And we would like you to be named after it. So I said to him kiddingly, I said, I have to ask my grandma and grandpa, who came from Russia, can I have my name on the wall of a cathedral? And I was kidding. And he, of course, thought that was funny. Lo and behold, they did. And when they dedicated the courtroom, I'm going to tell you a story you may not even know. They are dedicating the courtroom, and who do they invite but Justice Ginsburg? So the dean, Justice Ginsburg, myself, the mayor of D.C. are all there on the stage. And the dean introduces everybody and then calls upon Justice Ginsburg. And I'm sitting there 2 seats away from her. The dean was next to her. And everybody talks. I talk about my background, the dean's story about, we already rejected you. The place was packed. Nancy was sitting right there in the front, and we're walking down and out. So you walk by twos down the steps and out, and they opened up for the justice. So she turns to me and she says, "Skippy, you've really had an interesting life." And I said, "Yes." And we took pictures, she and I, and she then got in the courtroom, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I'll never forget that. I have pictures of that.
Yeah, I have a question about it. And listen, Justice Ginsburg, she was just an incredible jurist. But what was it like that moment when were you reflecting on kind of where you had started, and now Supreme Court justice is there, really in your honor, and to basically have a courtroom named after you, with the love of your life, and just being part of that moment in time. Did you ever envision that would be something that was going to happen to you?
Never. That was too far in a dream. Nancy and I dream. We dreamt when we first were eating tuna fish all the time. But the funny part about it is that with her strength and her tender touch, we made it. And as crazy as I've been doing trial work, New York City, New Jersey, I've had them in Texas. That was another interesting case, Montana, and California one. It's just been fascinating. But you have to have, I said this before, you have to have an understanding partner.
No doubt about that. In terms of just, other things that you've done, I know that you have a symposium, right, that you created. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
I'll be happy to do it.
The Holocaust,
those are two different subjects. Yeah. Okay. I felt that the trial advocacy program at Washington College of Law was not up to snuff. So I spoke to the director, and I said, I really would like this to be a focal point of lawyers, students who want to become trial lawyers. And we created a trial program. And I sponsored it. Nancy and I sponsored it. Actually, it was in my name. She sponsored it by her heart, but it was in my name. And we set up, and ultimately, we became third in the country for trial advocacy. And then when she left, the director, she went to Temple Law School. It became fourth, and then something happened. There were deans there that were horrible, and the program just went down. And I've been back pushing and kicking to bring it back up. But hopefully I'll live that long to see it get back up. The other question you asked me was about the Holocaust Symposium.
Right.
Many, many years ago, the president of FDU and a professor of philosophy who were having dinner with Thursday night with his wife said they wanted to meet us meaning Nancy and I, for dinner. And we met at the restaurant, and we were sitting around. I don't drink. Nancy may have had a glass of wine, but whatever. And all of a sudden, they say, we would like to give you a proposal. Fairleigh Dickinson University, the president was there speaking, and the person in charge, the philosophy PhD, was there. He said, we would like to set up a Holocaust symposium and genocide, and we would like you to sponsor it. So I said, tell me what that means. And I was not astute enough to realize only they wanted money and the name for Nancy and me. So they finally broke it down and told me what they wanted and what they'd like to do. And Nancy's family, my family, we all have family that came through and didn't come through. And it was very important to me to continue this. So I accepted it, Nancy accepted it. In Roxton, England, Fairleigh Dickinson University has this magnificent estate. And we would go there every 2 years. And a professor from around the world, not Asia, not Africa, would have to apply to the professor and the leaders of this organization in our name. And they would have to, there were 36 of them, and they would come for 5 days and talk about the books they're writing about the genocide of the Holocaust. And they would then write the books, sending chapters to each of them to write their part. And we did that for quite a number of years. COVID hit, and for 2 sessions, it couldn't happen. So it kind of dissipated itself. But it was a wonderful attempt to be able to do that, and it was rather successful. The funny and sad and wonderful end of this story is that one of the members of our group was a woman by the name of Teresa Ciszke. She's Polish. She is the person in charge of showing people around Auschwitz and Birkenau, which are the 2 concentration camps. So after one of the meetings, I said to Teresa, Nancy and I have never been. She said, come, I'll take you around. So Nancy and I winding up in Warsaw and then going to Auschwitz and Birkenau. And I came with my religious scarf and my yarmulke, and during the tears of the prayers, I put a stone down that I brought with me from a place in Cape Cod, and I buried it in the crematorium. And she was very good to us, knowing that we were going to be absolutely blown away. I spoke to Teresa 2 weeks ago, and our daughter is going to be in Krakow and the Auschwitz in 2 weeks. So she's going to meet our daughter at Auschwitz. Nancy's professor at FDU, she's taking courses at the school. He's going to be there in about a month. So she's aware of 2 of our people going to Auschwitz, which she will then show around.
So, Skippy, it's obviously a very important issue for
Yes,
the
it is.
world,
Yes.
which is the anti-Semitism, the hatred, the bigotry. And I wanted to get your perspective on this because obviously, I know that you always want to lead by example. Is there any advice for us, just as a society, what we can do to come more together and more accepting instead of all this hatred towards each other?
I think you have to look within. When I hear or read that a politician wants to eliminate anti-Semitism, and if you don't, I'm going to remove 300 million from your budget, I think that does the opposite. So you have to look into and turn it. Is it really doing that, or is it getting the people who would benefit from the 300 million? Are they getting angry because that money is being withheld because we're not doing enough to prevent anti-Semitism? So I think you have to look deeply in the giver, in the recipient, and the reasons why it's given or not given. And I think number 2, anti-Semitism, I once did a research thing, must have been about a year ago. What started anti-Semitism? It fascinated me because I never understood. I was sitting in this room, actually, watching a football game on Sunday. Oh, this has got to be a number of years ago. I get a phone call from a priest that I knew. And he was a Monsignor then. And he says, I need to talk to you. I said, fine, I'll see you tomorrow. He says, no, we're in the driveway. I said, what? He said, we want to see you now. And I said, who's we? Well, the bishop and the Monsignor, they were parked over here. They opened the door. They came in. We closed this door. And they asked me to represent the Catholic Church on 28 different cases. Well, I said, what do you want me for? They said, we don't want an Italian or an Irish. We want a Jewish lawyer so it doesn't look like there's this marriage. Of course, I'm going to defend my people. And for a number of years, I did. I defended the Catholic Church. And they ultimately settled. They had to settle the cases. And that was, you represent people from all structures. And it was very difficult to hear the stories that they tell.
Yeah, and it'll be a very poignant moment for your family when they go back to, obviously, the horrible concentration camps. So, Skippy, it means so much you took time today. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you today is the legacy. Because as I'm getting a little older in life, I'm kind of like, what legacy do you want to be known for? Have you ever put any thought to that recently in terms of, how you want to be thought of?
I did. I'm 86, and Nancy and I have kind of danced around this. We want to make sure that the money that we've spent for different entities that Nancy has chosen, I have chosen. She chooses, I choose. We want them to be able to use the money for the benefit of the public. And that to me and to Nancy is very important. We would like to give our children something, but we would like to give the institutions something that are very important. Seeing Eye, American Ballet, Atlantic Health. These are places where we would like to make sure that the structure is there. It reminds me of something I've done on a number of occasions. And this is terrible for me to say this, and I hesitate to say it, but Nancy will tell me later if I should have or should not have. There are many occasions when I don't want people to know who I am or what I did. I'll give you an example, but I won't go beyond this. When I'm online recently at a Stop and Shop, the woman in front of me was a nun, and she had a bunch of things, and she gave the card. I wasn't paying any attention. And the person said to her sister, the card is expired. And she said, well, I don't have any money. So she said, do you have anything, sister, I can use? And she said, no. And I said, sister, I don't want you to know who I am. My name is not important. And I turned to the person and I said, I'll cover her. Sister, you take this and you go. And she said, oh, I said, sister, bless me tonight when you do your prayers. Just bless me without knowing my name or who I am. And I came home. I was so excited to tell Nancy. And that happens to me. And I'm so happy to do it. I did it to a Portuguese man in Walmart. I was so excited to do that. Because you want to do things that let people have their own dignity. You don't want to ever take dignity away. Because if you do, you don't have a person that's strong to survive. So that when you ask me, what is your legacy? My legacy is to have people say, I want to do better for myself, but I want to do better for other people out there. I want to have a relationship that lasts. I want it to be a respectful relationship. I want to be able to make money, to donate money. And these things are very important to Nancy and important to me.
So Skippy, like I said, God bless you and your wonderful family. It means the world you took time to speak with us, because that is the journey of giving back. And for everyone, there's folks out there like Skippy Weinstein. It doesn't matter where you started, where you end. You know, people say you can't do this or you can't do that. You got to believe in yourself. He's a self-made man. You talk about Horatio Alger, from rags to riches, but not just financial wealth, but to give back and to make the world better. The whole idea of my show is to make the world better, to inspire and motivate. If you like what you hear, check us out on YouTube, like and subscribe. My family tells everyone, smash that subscribe button. Check out the ToddLeonardShow.com website for more exciting shows and to learn more about our mission. God bless you, and remember, we're all in this together. Take care.
The Todd Leonard Show is sponsored by the Leonard Foundation, whose mission is to support the children and families who are battling pediatric cancer and those in need of food and assistance, women's shelters, and other important social services in the community. They also proudly support those fighting pancreatic cancer. They feel it's vitally important to help those in need in our amazing community when they need us the most. Please join them in extending a helping hand and go to leonardcharity.org and donate now. Together, we can touch many lives.